Senator O'Donnell, you'd like to
Yeah, good morning, Carla. Yeah, just to refer back to the initial question around priorities, I think one of the thread that's woven throughout all of the presentations that came before us, and indeed through the body of this report, is the aspiration for some kind of special status. Now, people might have different views of that, people might have different approaches in terms of the name and everything else, but I think there's a broad consensus that there needs to be, as a priority, a special status, not least for the North, given its unique position, as has been outlined previously. And actually, 2 weeks ago, the Good Friday Agreement Implementation Committee launched its report into Brexit, and I think many of us were very heartened to hear the Minister, Simon Coveney, argue very strongly that it was his position to argue for special status. Now, of course, we need to hear the outworking of what that will look like, what that will mean, and we obviously, as members of this committee, will be listening intently. So, you know, in terms of even financial resources, there's huge financial resource that goes into the North from the EU, whether that's through infrastructural funding, whether that's through common agricultural policy, whether that's through peace funding, which is hugely significant, particularly when you look at the current political discourse in the North. While, thank God, things haven't necessarily manifested themselves on the street, there are indeed communities that are still suffering from the legacy of conflict, and the EU has played a very, very directly positive influence in supporting those communities beyond conflict as well. So all of that can't be taken for granted. But I think when we reflect back on the hearings, when we reflect on the body of this report, I think the continuous thread that emerges from a whole broad, certainly the vast bulk of sectors who were in and engaged with this committee, was a very, very strong case that we needed to have a special arrangement and special status put in place.
Thanks very much.
Contribution from the unionist parties, some of whom are for Brexit, unfortunately. Some are a wee bit more agnostic of late on the issue. But certainly I'm confident we had a very, very broad range of political, societal, cultural opinion present to the committee, and I actually thank them, because it's important to note for the record that, you know, there are joint committees in this institution that afford unionist elected representatives positions. The Good Friday Agreement Committee, the unionist MPs have speaking rights at that committee, and unfortunately don't take those positions up. So we would welcome that input. I don't think this committee will rest on our laurels. We want this document to be an evolving document as the implications of Brexit roll out. We want it to be a living document. So certainly from our perspective, sure, I hope I'm not breaking any confidence, but we're hoping to take this out on the road. We're looking to engage with sectors and with communities, not least along the border corridor, and we will certainly be proactive in seeking out unionists and indeed others, because and I'll finish on this, one sector which I think has maybe fallen under the radar in the whole concern around Brexit is actually the status currently of ethnic minority communities and non-EU citizens who are resident in the North and have been for a long period of time. Many of them are very, very unsure about their citizenship status. They want to avail of Irish citizenship, which isn't as easy for them under what's called the naturalisation process, not a term I like. But nevertheless, my point is we want to engage with a broad range beyond the very significant range we've engaged with already.
Yeah, at the very back.
Political ramifications are going to have an impact on our economy, and this report, the presentations, the protests, the lobbying, the campaigning are all manifestations of that and a political reaction. But at the core political component and threat of Brexit is that at the heart of the Good Friday Agreement, which we've all agreed is sacrosanct, which we've all agreed takes primacy in this regard, is the agreement and the endorsement by referenda, both North and South, that there would be no change in the constitutional status unless it was consented to by the people here. Brexit changes that. No one gave their consent on the island of Ireland, either North or South, to the threat being posed to us by Brexit. So, of course, that is a very direct, acute pointed and I believe could be ultimately very dangerous political implication as a result of a decision taken elsewhere, and of course a decision in the north being ignored very quickly. Chair, in terms of the tourism aspect, tourism for me manifests very clearly just how disastrous Brexit could be when you already see, certainly from my perspective, from a tourism perspective, partition in itself must already present enough fallacy and problems for you. But even, again, that cross-sectoral threat, the All-Ireland Tourism Ireland body, which is set up under the Good Friday Agreement, how and under God can they go and promote Ireland as a single entity, as a tourism destination overseas, if there is, for example, all of the ramifications of Brexit rolled out? In terms of the Human Rights Act, Michael, I agree with you. It's one that we need to be at the most senior governmental level in Ireland and indeed across Europe very acutely conscious of as we move forward. I think it's probably part of the reason, amongst others, why you're seeing a huge influx of applications for Irish passports in the north, because people are trying to hold on to a European citizenship, which they hope will allow them to access European courts, European justice system, European legislation, although again there is no guarantees around that. What I would like to see would be the delivery of a Bill of Rights in the north as promised in the Good Friday Agreement, which would go some way to countering and ensuring rights of people in the north. But you're right, again we have no answers at this stage, but to go back to the very first question in terms of the our friend from the Financial Times, there you have a very sharp political ramification as a result of Brexit.
Briefly to conclude.